Okay.
Let's bow in, everybody. Again,
Oh, you have to co-host me. Okay.
okay.
Do you want to say a word of introduction before I start?
Okay. This is Philip. I'm John.
No, I mean,
I
usually
know,
you
I'm
introduce
kidding.
the book.
Okay. So, welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. We're reviewing, or we're going back again, or for some of you the first time, through the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma. We're on volume 1. These are supposedly beginning teachings, and I think I and others find them so profound as well, because Trungpa Rinpoche, who gave these teachings, really always spoke from the point of view of Dzogchen Ati, the most advanced teaching. Although he was giving beginning teachings, he gave them from that perspective. These teachings are a digest. This book is a digest of teachings that were given over a period of about 15 years or more. Every year, Trungpa Rinpoche took a group of students, 150 to 250 students, away for 3 months for an extended retreat, similar to the kind of experiences he had in Tibet with his own guru, Shechen Kongtrul. And during those periods of time, people would study and practice. There would be periods of just pure practice, and then there would be periods where their time was devoted more to study, but there was always still some practice. And the first third of those 3 months would be devoted to the so-called Hinayana teachings, which he preferred to call foundational vehicle teachings. The second month to the Mahayana, and the third to the Vajrayana. And we are on volume 1, so we are working our way through the Hinayana teachings, volume 1, the path of individual liberation. Tonight, Philip is going to lead off with chapter 29. So, Philip.
Okay, thank you. So yes, this is chapter 29, Encountering Problems. We're on page 215 of the text. This chapter is very straightforward and it's delightful. You could think of it almost as a toolbox, talking about common problems and obstacles to meditation and solutions or antidotes to them. So Chogyam Trungpa begins by talking about lack of commitment. He points out that you need to have both ambition and commitment. He then talks about this. He says, you're unable to handle your situation, which is awkward, but that awkwardness leads you to meditation practice, which is beautiful. Your karma, which we can think of as cause and effect, action and consequence, your karma has brought you to this spot. I think what he means there is that most people come, at least initially, to Buddhism because there's something in their life that has caused them to think, I have to do something differently. Usually, if their lives are flawless, they're not looking for Buddhism. And he's saying that this situation, this awkward situation, which has brought you here, is actually a blessing because, as we've said before, learning to meditate, studying Buddhism, that's probably the most important thing you'll ever encounter in your entire life. So that's how I would read that. He finishes this short section by cautioning against the extended dream. He makes an admonition for us to stay focused, to come back to the present, the here and now. We hear that over and over again. John uses these words often. He says, we need to shift our allegiance from the dream to the present. And that's what Chogyam Trungpa is saying here. It's no different really than what we were looking at last week when we were talking about labeling thoughts and returning to our meditation, or touch and go. or even what we were talking about a month ago when we were talking about cutting the root of samsara. If you can learn to be right here, right now, everything will work so much better. Last night in our discussion, we were talking a lot about being fully present. And that's the only way you can be fully present, is to drag yourself out of the past, drag yourself out of the future, and be here now. That's what all of this is about. That's what this chapter is about. He moves on then to talk about lack of synchronization. And he introduces the term Xinjiang, which means thoroughly processed. And what that means essentially is that your meditation is working very well. You've been able to shift your allegiance. You're able to bring your body, and here we can think of our breath as a proxy for the body, or bringing our body and our mind together. We're dropping our mind into our body. Sometimes people will say it that way. He goes on to say the idea of synchronization is that your mind goes out with the breath. What we talk about twice a day when we meditate. Your mind goes out with your breath. He talks about posture and breath. He says, because of your posture, your breathing happens naturally. In turn, each breath serves as a way to correct your posture. So with those two sentences, he's talking about bringing our mind and our body together, making it one thing and making it work. He moves on to another set of obstacles, which he calls the beckoning of the sense perceptions. And his advice here, again, you'll hear it twice a day when we meditate, are open eyes and a soft gaze to diffuse your vision. The idea is if your focus is too sharp, you're going to see something and chase it with thoughts and get lost in a dream. You don't want to do that. On the other hand, you do want to maintain a sense of awareness, and it's important to have open eyes for that. So it's a fine line. You hear over and over again the notion of a stringed instrument. It needs to be tuned just right, not too tight, not too loose. That comes to play here, I think. He says, you are somewhat self-contained. You have a basic one-pointedness. He talks about meditation practice as a question of having some kind of trust, rather than trying to achieve an ideal state of mind that will make you okay. Sometimes I think we think this to death, and I think we need that sense of trust. Faith is sort of a loaded word, confidence maybe. We really need confidence, particularly for this, to rest assured in the notion that this will sort itself out, that the system works. As Chogyam Trungpa says over and over and over again, just sit, and you'll find that it will work. So meditation practice is a question of having some kind of trust, rather than trying to achieve an ideal state of mind that will make you okay. A lot of the things we're hoping to understand here happen almost automatically. And again, the only thing you really need to do is sit, just sit. He says, when your perceptions begin to relax, you can learn how to just be. You can regard visual and auditory tension as thoughts, as the thinking process, and treat them that way. For that matter, you can regard feelings and emotions as thoughts and treat them that way. You'll learn as we go along that there's essentially one big antidote, and that's simply to return to the meditation practice. Thoughts come up, what you've already been learning. You label them, you let them go, you return to the practice. But then he moves on to talk about pain. He draws a distinction between psychological physical pain versus actual physical pain, and says it's up to you to determine which type of pain you are experiencing. If it's actual physical pain, simply adjust your posture. And then he says, often though, it's more of a mental dialogue. But here too, the advice is simply to adjust your posture. If you remember anything from my talk, this is it. Posture, posture, posture. That's the single most important thing. People have been talking about that for 2,600 years. And whenever you hit an obstacle in your meditation practice, just stop and adjust your posture and start over. He says, don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. A good, talking about pain here, don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. A good rule of thumb is this: if the pain is clearly interfering with your meditation, then attend to it. Take a deep breath, adjust your posture, return to your meditation practice, follow the technique. I promised John I would stay on track, but I recently came across a guy who had done a 1-month retreat and spent the whole time chasing down his own pain and analyzing his pain and then writing a 300-page book on it. He was a neuroscientist from Harvard, I think. That's not what this is about. If the pain gets in your way, just, adjust your posture and go back to your meditation. Drowsiness. Chogyam Trungpa says drowsiness has many causes, and he says it's not particularly a problem. He says it's just an energy level. He says if you regard it as a problem, that will create further drowsiness. Once more, he says, take a deep breath, adjust your posture, then return to your meditation practice. Follow the technique. He talks about tightness. Same thing. Take a deep breath, adjust your posture, return to your meditation practice, follow the technique. Here too is the metaphor of a stringed instrument, not too tight, not too loose. He talks about eye strain. The idea in meditation is just to look without bringing anything back to your system. By that, I think he means, we were touching on this earlier, don't haul a story that's out there in here. Just look, don't bring anything into your system. Open eyes, soft, steady gaze. If you close your eyes when you sit, it becomes like switching on to meditation when you shut your eyes, then switching off when you open them. And there's too much contrast between meditating and not meditating, which is not particularly recommended. What he does recommend, of course, is just the opposite, to ultimately effect a smooth transition from the cushion into your regular other life. So that it's not a question of my eyes are open or my eyes are closed, I'm meditating or I'm not meditating. In a sense, you're meditating all the time, wherever you are. You're aware all the time. You're present in the here and now all the time, paying attention, catching problems when they're small. All of those things that we're learning. Trance, he says, it's just a thought. Treat it like a thought. Ringing in the ears. He suggests here that you're trying too hard. And he says, again, take a deep breath, adjust your posture, then return to your meditation practice. Follow the technique. Straying from the text a little bit in a personal anecdote, all of my life, or at least for the last many decades, I've had a big problem with tinnitus. And one thing I've noticed is that meditation has relieved that. So if any of you have problems with that, you can just focus on space and awareness. And at least for me, that causes it to go away. So then he moves into suggestions for responding to obstacles. And he's already hit on the main point here many times. It is basically taking a fresh start. He says, when you have difficulty with the constant interruptions that occur in following your breath, you could mentally take a break. Just mentally take a break and start again. And then I love this part coming up because it's so generous and encouraging. And it's what John teaches us all the time about Maitri and not blaming yourself, being gentle with yourself, being a friend to yourself. Chogyam Trungpa says, just mentally take a break and start again. You can do that 100 times an hour. Keep coming back. Take a break and come back. That's what we're learning here, right? Is how to be in present moment awareness. And how do you learn anything? You do it over and over and over and over and over again. So every time you drift off, don't beat yourself up. Notice it, learn to notice it, and then come back. He says, don't blame yourself. Whenever things get too tangled up, just cut it right there. Give the whole thing up and start fresh. Starting fresh means coming back to your posture, to your awareness of your head and shoulders, and then going back to the breath. He says, meditation has to be simple. Otherwise, we're creating another world. He goes on to say, awareness takes hard work. You need a careful, ambitious approach to trying to work with yourself, to the point that you're becoming aware every moment. There is no other way. In a 1-hour sitting practice, you have to pull yourself back at least 60 times. When you come back, you have your body and your breath. As soon as you realize you're thinking, you're already back. We say that twice a day in our practice, right? As soon as you realize you're thinking, you're already back. So be gentle with yourself. You are not sitting to accomplish something. You are sitting to understand something. So you need to take a more passive attitude. Everything can be very smooth, simple, and ordinary. And he ends by talking a little bit about exertion and humor. Pretty straightforward. He says, in sitting practice, exertion is very important. And then he says it's crucial to have a sense of humor. If you have humor, you do not take your practice as painful. He finishes by saying, we appreciate our life and have a good time. And at the same time, we need to have tremendous exertion. So that's what I've prepared here. And I'd like to open it up for any questions. And then John is going to go on to the next chapter.
Oh,
I have a question for a friend.
Sure.
Philip said that if a person has a flawless life, they typically don't come for Buddhism. And I know somebody who's pretty happy, has a simple life. And when I talk to them about meditation, they call it happy talk. This past weekend, we went hiking up in Woodstock, and there's a temple up there. Supposedly, I think it's the temple of the Karmapa. And we went into the bookstore, and she was looking around at the books, and she said a good book for her would be a book on meditation for children. And I was wondering if you could suggest or recommend a book for a beginner that treated the person like a child, something that was very simple and uncomplicated. By the way, they had a whole shelf of stuff from Joygam Trungpa.
Yes, he has a lot of titles. I don't know if one of his is going to satisfy that need. Do you have a recommendation, John, from off the top of your head? Well, I'm going to make a note of it.
no,
And
I
then
do.
think some.
Mary?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Emma Chodron's book, How to Meditate.
Perfect. Yes.
That's
It's
good.
wonderful.
Yeah.
PEMA.
Yeah, I have a couple of her books already. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Barry. That's a great suggestion.
And if you really wanted a book written for children, there's a book by a woman named Christy Cashman, my first wife, actually. And she wrote a book for kids. And I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure if you Googled or, went to Amazon.
How do you spell the last name?
Cashman. Christy Cashman. but it's actually
Okay.
a children's book. It really is a children's book. And it's about the Shambhala teachings. And it's a fantasy. I found some amazing things in this chapter myself. The constant injunction to come back first 100 times and then 60 times. And then it's okay to do that. So, and then the constant injunction to take a fresh start. Just thought it was, really good. He said, oh, and this I thought was really helpful for me personally. You don't have to push to accomplish. You don't have to push to accomplish. In other words, it's not about accomplishment. He said, it's not about accomplishment. It is about understanding, and pushing doesn't help. It's about understanding, not accomplishment. How about that? That is something we ought to just write on our glasses or something. It's not about accomplishment, it's about understanding. So you don't have to push to accomplish something. Tremendous relaxation in that, I thought. Merrick.
It's not a question, but a comment about this chapter. Like you said, it's wonderful, and I'm someone who has a lot of self-talk. This chapter comes as really something refreshing and a wonderful reminder that, just like you say, it's okay. Because I do sometimes find myself pushing, almost like realize I'm pushing so hard. And the moment I actually realize that, it also, goes away. So yeah, that was if there is nothing to accomplish, or if there is nowhere to arrive, that's absolutely true. How can I lose anything?
How can you what?
How can I lose anything if there is nothing to accomplish? That's why coming back to it, yeah, I will probably read this chapter over and over when I'm too hard on myself about my meditation practice.
I think we could all do that. He says there are no tricks and no magic. Everything can be very simple, smooth, and ordinary. You are just being. It's like floating in the Dead Sea. I wonder if he ever did that. I can't imagine. The Dead Sea is so full of salt that it's hard to sink.
Along the lines of the naturalness of all of this, I didn't introduce it in my talk, but at the beginning I was thinking where he's talking of the first common obstacle, the lack of commitment. At the beginning of every one of our meditations, we talk about the 4 reminders: the preciousness of human birth, impermanence, the inevitability of death, the overarching power of karma, the insidiousness of samsara. That's the world that we live in. Buddhists talk all the time about motivation, and those motivations are there for us. We're incredibly lucky to be born as humans, to be born in a place where the Dharma is being studied. We're lucky to have found a qualified teacher. We're lucky to have found a Sangha that works together. Not all of them do. The fact is that sometime we are going to die. The fact is also we don't know when that time is. Whether you believe in rebirth or not, karma is nothing but cause and effect, right? It's nothing but action and consequence. And it operates over a second or a minute or an hour or a day or a week or a month or a year or a decade or a lifetime or many lifetimes. If you want to put that last on the back burner and deal with the rest, that's it. But karma is working all the time. And the insidiousness of samsara, what that means is, even when we think things are going well, in fact, they're not. The new car you got is great for like a month or two, and then it's suddenly an old car, right? Every morning we chant it. What do we say about that? It's like the feast, just like a feast before the executioner leads you to your death, right? That's the good stuff. So all those things are up and running all the time. We don't really need to look for a reason to practice. The reasons are there. It's useful to remember that and touch base with them, and that's why we say it. And we do say it rather than chant it. That's why we say it before each meditation, and we pause after each line. We don't do that with any of the chants, but we do that with the reminders.
Yeah, these chapters, they're urging on us one of the things, the urgency of it, that we're going to die. And some of us sooner than later. I just remember my father's last words when he died in his own bed at home, were, "I never thought it would be like this." Those are the last words out of his mouth. And what we're doing in coming back to awareness, they say this is the best preparation for death. This is the way you want to die, just the way you want to live, same way. I'd like to say something about this last paragraph on exertion and humor. I thought it was pretty funny. Rinpoche talked about how when he was a kid, he wanted to get out of meditation, so he pretended to be constipated. And he sat forever on toilets, on the toilet. And he was very heavily attended as a child by his servants and teachers, and they let him do this. And then they gave him moxibustion. This is an ancient Oriental medicine, where what they do is they put herbs on your skin and burn them on your skin, and it's what's called moxibustion. And that got him off the toilet when they did the moxibustion. And then I was reminded of a famous story about a yogi who has been sitting in meditation in a retreat for years, and he feels like he's getting nowhere. And he's got this shrine in front of him, and he's got an offering on the shrine. And one day, as he's sitting there, he watches a mouse come up, go across the shrine, take his offering, and drag it off and to go eat it. And he starts laughing, this yogi. And at that point, he has realization. It's like his humor, the humor of seeing this mouse eating his offering to the Buddha. Famous story. I don't know where it comes from. So, any other comments or questions? Well, I'll go on to the next chapter called Leading a Spotless Life. And really what this is about is the importance, thank you, of post-meditation practice. And really, I think of it as, in college, you have lab experiences where you create an artificial environment in order to learn a lesson that then you can apply in real life, out in the real world. That's what sitting meditation is. It's kind of a lab experience for us to take the principle of meditation into our daily lives in what's called, ironically, post-meditation. It's not really post-meditation. It's the application of meditation to daily life. The term in Tibetan is jetop. So he says, when you finish sitting meditation session, that is when the actual practice begins. Post-meditation, or meditation in action. It is a question of heedfulness, looking at what you're doing, You could practice that any time. You come back from dream into awareness here. Whatever you're doing, sitting on the toilet, cooking dinner, talking to a friend on the phone, doesn't matter, putting on your clothes in the morning. He says, it's like cooking school producing a good cook, or basic training producing a good soldier. That's what meditation practice on the cushion is. It's like basic training that produces a good soldier. Then we go out and we use that meditation in our daily lives. Without post-meditation discipline, we would regard sitting practice the same way some Christians regard going to church on Sunday. It's just this thing you do on Sunday and then you forget about it for the rest of the week. Sitting practice is basic training, and post-meditation is developing openness and communication with the world at large. So we bring that awareness that we're working on the cushion out into the world, coming back from dream, experiencing this world as it is, seeing it clearly, without preconception, without judgment. Anytime you can do that, that's meditation in action. And it'll happen in moments or longer, depending on you and your mood. And don't be hard on yourself. If we go through the bulk of the day lost in dream, and then suddenly you wake up, oh yeah, here I am. He says walking meditation is a bridge between sitting and post-meditation, because we get up and walk and we're actually starting to go into action. Your whole body has to be acknowledged. And you can take this posture, this is the Zen thing, this posture here at your sternum, or you can just let your arms swing and just be aware of them. But you're aware of the movement of your body, your foot swinging forward, your heel coming down, your weight transferring, your back leg lifting off and swinging forward. And you're aware of your body as it moves through the space of the room. And you do it in a very easy way. And if you find yourself getting too self-conscious about it, just let go and come back to the easiness of it. The same applies to mealtime, awareness, and precision. And I was thinking, when we haven't done this in a long time, but when we used to do month-long sitting programs, again, Rinpoche was inspired, Trungpa Rinpoche, by seeing sesshin, month-long sitting programs at Tassajara, the Zen Mountain Center, west of Carmel in the mountains of California. And he saw sesshin, people sitting for a month. And one of the things they do at sesshin is they eat in a very ritualized, formal style. Everything is choreographed, totally. I mean, it's really, for those of you who haven't done it, it's called oryoki. And when you practice this, and we did at Daton, when we do weektons now, it's too short a time to introduce oryoki. Oryoki takes some time to learn. And you have a special bowl set that's wrapped in a special way, and cloths, and you have special chopsticks and a spoon and cleaning implements, and it's all wrapped in this kit. And you get your kit, which is sitting on a stand, and you come over and you sit down, and then there's a gong and a clacker, and the people who are serving enter with holding the bowls, and it's all very, very ritualized. They bow, and then they come to each seat, bow, bend down, you take the food, bow again, they stand up, go to the next seat. In fact, who is it? We have some oryoki mavens in our sangha. People who know the detail is endless. It's just, but there's some Roland Cohen is a person in the Boulder Sangha who's a real oryoki maven. He knows tons of oryoki detail. So, sense of sacredness is expanded so that whatever you might do or whatever you might not do is included. Just awareness. When he says sacredness, it's because we're seeing things stripped of our comments, if only in glimpses. And that's when they become sacred. That's when they begin to become more vivid. So walking meditation is a real sort of a bridge between sitting and daily life, meditation and daily life, meditation in action, what is often called, really improperly termed, post-meditation. Because it's not after the meditation, it's just the meditation in life. And in fact, that's the real point, is to bring this into your life. He says, when you find your mind is miles away, as in sitting practice, you label whatever comes up as thinking and return to the technique, the breath going out, dissolving, and here you are. You're simplifying everything. And if you're doing walking meditation, right, left, dissolve, and so forth. And you label thoughts just as in sitting meditation. The thought comes up, you see it, you say thinking, and you come back to your arms and legs swinging, the weight transferring, and you're moving through the space. Probably a bit slower than you would naturally, because you're working on mindfulness. Mindful speech. In post-meditation, he says this is important. A lot of neurosis comes from babbling. And I keep thinking of a friend of mine who really babbles. When you practice mindful speech, you begin to look good and feel healthy. And I think of this person, whatever comes into this person's mind comes out her mouth. It's just like that. And it's not healthy. It's not good. It doesn't feel right. He says you don't just bark each time your thoughts are ready to announce something. Instead, you hold back. You respect what or whom you are barking at. And you could also practice silence, which isn't regarded as a protest. It's a way of giving yourself a rest. Finally, here we go, continual wakefulness. The idea of post-meditation, JTOP, is to develop something out of your sitting practice that continues. Meditation in action. Throughout the day, if any time you can remember awareness, you're lost in thought, you're involved in doing something, and you come back to a simple awareness. If you can do it while you're driving your car, you'll be a safer driver and a better driver. You can bring awareness to anything, even listening to this or reading. The point is that you should be wakeful every minute in every situation. Yes, that's an injunction. And not just slide or lose your awareness. Even while you're reading, being right on the dot, being present every waking moment, in contact with reality as much as you can. He says, no time off. No time off. Mindfulness practice is not just about what is happening to you individually and personally. Mindfulness practice. It is about how much you are going to transmit your sanity and your insanity to the rest of the world. So when you become mindful, you are transmitting your sanity. When you lose your mindfulness, you start to transmit your insanity to the rest of the world. Your babbling mind, or babbling running minds. So we come back. And he says post and sitting meditation are symbolized in chants often by the syllable ah, om, ah, hum, ah, representing openness and humor. And it represents the Dharma. So it's not about calming down and soothing yourself. This is a theistic idea of meditation. Ah, trying to be awake as opposed to asleep. Ah, I'm awake. You could say ah to yourself, a seed syllable. It's what they're called. Hum is a seed syllable. Om is a seed syllable. There are many. He says, eventually you drop the techniques, labeling, for example, but you keep the watchfulness, the direct spark of awareness. Just be there. So you could drop the technique of labeling from time to time, and just be there. And check your head and shoulders, both in daily meditation and when you're walking around. How you walk and how you look at people. Try to transcend embarrassment, he says. Take pride in being a human being and a practitioner. And he calls this positive arrogance. It's a matter of being present. And I always felt that Trungpa Rinpoche was so present. When he gave a talk, he'd often be sitting there with a glass of scotch in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And he seemed so aware of what he was holding, and when he took a drag on the cigarette or when he took a sip of scotch. I remember one time in a meditation hall here in Boulder, he was sitting in his chair and he dropped his glass on the floor and it spilled. Everybody was shocked. How could he do that? Make a mistake like that? He just looked at us all and grinned and said, I don't know what he said, but the gist of it was, it doesn't matter. Stay aware through all of it. Flashes of wakefulness occur in your life, in your practice and during the day. He says, disown them, forget them, and disown them, and just come back to life. Don't be self-righteous or self-indulgent. He says, he recommends instead a sense of totality. Once you're involved with practice, that involvement begins to remind you. There's nothing particularly formal about it. Instead, it is as if you were haunted all the time, positively haunted by awareness, by the need to be aware, by the need to come back. You need to maintain continuity in your awareness from the cushion to post-meditation. Once you're involved with practice, that involvement begins to remind you. It is as if you were haunted all the time again. A total environment of practice is important. Once you experience that environment of totality, that environment echoes back on you. And we begin just to be haunted by the idea of coming back to awareness. It begins to become the major theme of our lives. And when we come back to awareness, we come back to life, to living more fully. He says if you develop a dichotomy between your sitting practice and the rest of your activities, then sitting will feel like imprisonment. And the times you are not sitting will represent freedom, improvisation, having a good time. Even things out. Have a good time all over the place, he says. And we could have a good time bringing awareness back all over the place. When we're eating dinner, when we're in the shower, when we're talking to a friend, all over the place. Then it is the same good old world, sitting or standing, doesn't matter. He says your food will taste better. Says the purpose of discipline is to develop a very fuzzy edge between sitting and non-sitting. They begin to blur together. He says avoid the constant attempt to cheer oneself up. It's pathetic and it drives other people mad. Awareness is a big blanket, good and healthy. So the practice of meditation is not so much concerned with the hypothetical attainment of enlightenment, but with leading a good life. In order to learn how to lead a good life, a spotless life, you need continual awareness, and this is the theme. Leading a spotless life of continual awareness. Enlightenment happens willy-nilly by itself. That's what they say in all the teachings. It says you don't have to be poverty-stricken about your life. He talks about the chocolate chip approach. You want to get a little chocolate chip of pleasure. And it's really a poverty mentality, and it's punishment, because the rest of the time you're feeling deprived, lacking. Post-meditations, sitting and study, a blanket approach, a gigantic pancake stretching over your life, the pancake of post-meditation practice, and as well as sitting practice and study. Finally, he says, sitting meditation without post-meditation is like a sun without its brilliance, a king without a court, a picture without a nail, a bath without soap, like wearing your shoes without tying your shoelaces. Post-meditation is an integral part of meditation practice. That is why we do walking meditation, practice mindful eating, comb our hair, sit on the toilet. It is living life fully, properly, with appreciation and awareness and intelligence and compassion. So we can have a discussion. Pretty terrific chapter. I love that part about, in the previous chapter, about how meditation isn't about accomplishment, it's about understanding. Whew.
And in this chapter, I love the part, the practice of meditation is not so much concerned with the hypothetical attainment of enlightenment, but with leading a good life.
Yeah. Comments, complaints, arguments, merit.
Mine is not necessarily about the chapter, but something you said, it's just, my curiosity. You said, Rinpoche was lecturing with, a cigarette and a scotch in his hand, and then I just thought, so I just, for example, that refuge vow, or leading a good life in that sense, how was that received at the time? Because when you think about the vow, you refrain from unhealthy habits, and especially alcohol is the fifth one, which goes back to, if you do this, you probably will do the others too. So how did the students respond to that at the time?
Well, first of all, the vows that you take, like the 5 when you're in a meditation program, not to steal, murder, kill, lie, have improper sex, drink alcohol. Is that 5? I might have left one out. They are not a matter of moralistic being good. They are about awareness. They're all about awareness. So if you break one of the vows, if you take the vow, if you know you're going to have alcohol at dinner, you don't take that vow in the morning, okay? And then you haven't broken it. But if you do take it and then you break it, then you have to go to your meditation teacher and confess. But it's not confession in the sense of Christian confession, where you're admitting a sin. You're just bringing it to complete awareness by bringing it to another person's mind as well as your own, not hiding it, you see? And that's really the whole spirit of confession in Daten and of the precepts. And, I just remember my friend Henry Schaefer, who became a student of Trungpa Rinpoche after Suzuki Roshi died. He was originally a student of Roshi's. And he described how Roshi got wind that his students were very critical of Trungpa Rinpoche for his drinking and his womanizing, sleeping with so many women, having sex. And he called a meeting in the Zendo in San Francisco, and he was angry. And what he said was this, according to Henry. He said, what Trungpa Rinpoche is doing is very dangerous. He's taking on American karma. We were all ready to climb into one trip or another, become monks and nuns or whatever we were going to do, Hindu swamis. And what he was saying is, we have to give all that up. Those are just costumes that you're putting on thinking that it'll achieve something profound. And he was a living demonstration of that throughout. He constantly drank. And when I met him, I didn't know he was drinking, but until again, one day he was giving a talk to a group of us, and I went up to him afterwards. He had joined us to answer a particular question, and I didn't like my answer, and I went up to correct it after, and I waited my turn. And when I got to him, I was kneeling down. He was in a chair, and he leaned over and dropped his glass on the floor, and I realized he was drinking scotch. And then I learned he was drinking about a fifth of Johnny Walker a day. And yet, later I lived with him, and I helped him get up in the morning and put him to bed at night. I never felt that he was drinking to get away from life at all, not in the slightest. We all asked him, why do you drink? We never got straight answers. The best answer I ever got, or the one that I liked the best, was he said, because we knew it was going to kill him, and he knew it too. When I was about 26 or 7, and he must have been about 32 or something, he said to me one day, you better hurry up. I'm going to die at 37. Well, he died at 47. But the best answer I ever heard was he said the 10th incarnation, and he was the 11th, Trungpa Tulku, and the 10th had been a complete ascetic. Lived his life, a lot of his life, in a meditation box. That's a box there where you can't lie down, you can only sit. And was completely vegetarian, no sex, no alcohol. And he said, maybe the pendulum swung so far in my last life to that side that it had to come all the way over to this life, this side in this life. That's about the best answer I ever heard him give.
I mean, when you think about it, perhaps it's also a genius way to teach the teachings as well. Seeing things as they are and being non-judgmental from a student's side. So absolutely. I was just obviously curious how it was received, but in general, when you also catch yourself thinking or just looking at something, and if you can just, okay, what is it in me is making this comment or just thinking this way? So maybe it was a good practice for students.
I think it was. And you see, we were all very new to Eastern religion, which was flooding the country. Swami Satchidananda, Yogi Bhajan, every Zen and Tibetans, all of this was brand new. And a lot of people were going on religious trips, of one kind or another, trying to turn themselves into yogis or monks or whatever, be a brahmacharya, not have sex, be vegetarian, macrobiotics. I was macrobiotic when I met Trungpa Rinpoche, eating that terrible food. I went to meditation with a group. It was a place called the Arunachala Ashram for about a year and a half or so. And there were about 15, 20 of us, and we'd all bring food for dinner. And for us poor people, I used to bring these leaden loaves of yeastless bread, macrobiotic bread. So we were all going on these trips of trying to change ourselves, make ourselves over. And what he was saying is, no, it's not about doing that. It's about coming back and discovering your life in a real and wholesome way. And he was a walking demonstration. Not only that, he drank, as I say, like a fifth or a quarter, I don't know, Johnny Walker a day. He wasn't alcoholic in the normal sense. I mean, I've had many people in my family and among my close friends who are alcoholic. It's a disease, it's a retreat from life. It's a way of numbing yourself out. It's sort of almost suicidal. I never knew anybody who lived life more fully, vibrantly, with gusto from the instant he woke up in the morning to the moment his eyes closed in the evening. He was present. And not only was he present, but he was present for us. His constant interest was in us. It's like he just lived for the person sitting in front of him, constantly interested. Have I told you about the game? Did I tell you about that? Am I going on too long? What do you think, Barry? There was a game that we all played. And I'll tell you about this game. You will never be able to be it when I tell you about the game. But we were students. We played parlor games, sometimes. And this was the most popular one. It was called. We didn't have a name for it, so we just called it the game. You get a bunch of people sitting around, and you choose one person to be it, preferably somebody that you know a lot about. You know about their life, who the people are in their life. That helps a lot, because you send them out of the room, and then you explain to everybody else, which is us now, what the game is. And the game is that when that person comes back, we're going to tell them that they can ask any question to any one of us, and we will answer that question within the context of the game. And it's their job, the person who's it, to figure out what the game is by listening to our answers to their questions. Okay? So we send them out, and then I explain all this or somebody explains all this to the group there, and tells them what the purpose of the game is. And the purpose is that they're going to answer every question that person asks as though they were them. So if Paul were it, and he were to come back in and he were to ask me a question, I'm one of the group now, and he would say, John, what color is your shirt? I'd say, my shirt is light blue. Right? And if he were to ask me, ask somebody, are you married? And I don't know, Paul, are you married or you are? Even if I were single, I would say yes, because I'm being him. And it's his job to figure out that we're all answering as though we were him. Okay? The easiest way to get it is, and you advise the person, ask very mundane questions, like what's the color of your shirt? The more abstract the questions, the more difficult the game becomes for the person who's it. So if they ask you, what's your philosophy of life? That's not going to help them much, figure out what the game is. But if they ask you, are you married? Are you single? What color shirt are you wearing? What, all those kind of things. Very mundane questions. So we used to do this all the time. Some people would get it right away. They just ask a mundane question, and 2 or 3 questions, they'd have it. Some people would go on for quite a while. And sometimes it get kind of dicey, as, for instance, I remember at what's now Carmi Chirling, Tail of the Tiger, we were playing the game, and this woman who was very self-attacking, obviously, asked somebody in the group, do you like me? And the person said, not very much. Because they were being her, So we played it with Trungpa Rinpoche, and there's a point to this story. And there was a bunch of us sitting around, maybe 8 of us, and we were in his bedroom, and he's sitting on this ticky little bed. It was just, all we had were these Salvation Army mattresses. We didn't have any money. And Judy Hurley, one of his students, had tie-dyed sheets in Tibetan colors, yellow and orange, and The bed was covered with this sheet, and he's sitting on the bed, and he starts asking us the questions, any question you want. It went on and on and on. It went a couple of hours, and he couldn't get it. And I realized that the reason he wasn't getting it was because there was no self-reference. It wasn't going back to himself. He asked a person what shirt you're wearing, and he wasn't thinking about what shirt he was wearing. He was looking at what they were wearing and why did they answer that way. It was all about them. Finally, he asked someone, he had started drinking Mai Tais, and which is a pretty weird drink. And he asked someone, what's your favorite drink? And the person said, well, right now I'm kind of partial to Mai Tais. And I could see this look of sudden surprise on his face. And then he turned to someone else and he said, what's your favorite style of interior decoration? And the person said, well, I like the simplicity of Zen, the space punctuated by splashes of Tibetan color. The light bulb went off in his head. There was only one person who had that kind of aesthetic. He started laughing. He was holding his sides. I don't think he had a shirt on. He might have been naked even. And he's rolling on the bed, tears coming down his face. Oh my God. And I know that the reason he didn't get it was because of lack of self-reference. So when you talk about, people say, well, he was alcoholic. He was in the volume that he drank and the consistency, not here. Never depressed, always interested in the people sitting in front of him, terribly. Anyhow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I went on and on and on about that. Paul.
Merrick, I want to thank you for asking the question because that was going to be one of my questions. When I first considered being with the group, I looked him up and I saw that he did pass on at an early age, and I didn't and from cirrhosis of the liver, and I didn't understand that. I was as I may have mentioned before, I practiced TM for a long time, and the purpose was to reduce stress in the nervous system, and alcohol and other drugs cause more stress in the nervous system for me. Okay, I'm not, and they tell us that, and I noticed that my meditation to be different, and I guess it was a question. So if the person uses drugs, alcohol, I can't even drink coffee. I have a very sensitive constitution, I guess, because of years of practice of some sort of meditation. And but I do drink some alcohol, but I notice differences in my ability to remain present. As oftentimes I do get more spacey and more involved in fantasy, as opposed to being able to focus or stay present just in simple awareness. So for me, it doesn't work. Huh? It's not part of it's not part of the curriculum. We don't have to get high and
No.
Just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, he stressed that. If we each find our own true path, it's not a matter of imitation. Yeah. He used to talk about, he didn't like marijuana or LSD. He felt that they were too much air, that they took you into fantasy. Whereas alcohol, he said, grounds you. Alcohol is earth, as opposed to like marijuana and hashish being air. I just pass it on. I mean, that's what he felt. He felt alcohol was very earthy. But he didn't want his students to be alcoholics. He didn't want his students to imitate him. He warned against that. Each person has to find their own true path.
They say how do what the teacher say, but don't do what the teacher do. That's so.
Yeah. I felt these chapters were very grounded. For me, personally, the injunction that it's not about accomplishment, but about developing understanding, comprehension, meditation. As we sit there.
And also how in so many ways and from so many different points of view, it all works automatically. So think about appreciation, right? What makes appreciation possible? Attention. Attention makes appreciation possible. So if we're here now, fully focused, fully present, paying attention, we can appreciate the people we're with. We can appreciate the world that we live in. So John will talk about luminosity and bliss, and they're just different ways of saying the same thing. Sometimes it seems to me that Buddhism is nothing if not an adjustment in your point of view, right? The world is the same world, but we can learn to see it from a more real perspective, a perspective that is larger than ourselves just wrapped up in some kind of cloak that blinds us. And how do we do that? By constantly coming back to the present moment. Bit by bit, slowly, our own ego and all of the blindness that causes us will diminish, and our vision will expand, and our world will in fact become luminous.
The luminosity Philip is referring to is that when we begin to see without the veils of self-reference and self-doubt, then the world appears much more clearly. It's like taking off sunglasses, and the world appears much more vividly.
And you have each experienced that. I've heard people in the Sangha over the years say, very occasionally, I walk by this tree, the same tree they walk by every day for 100 days in a row. But that particular day, it was very different. It was there, it was present. It was like this living, breathing entity that they had never seen before. And unfortunately, the next day, it wasn't like that. They had sort of reverted to the old way of looking. But having seen it once, they know that that's its true nature, if you want, that it's possible to learn to always see like that. And if you look at your own experience, you'll find moments like that when suddenly something was just stunningly beautiful, right? Just knocked you down with its beauty for no reason you can explain. Somehow, the Christians would call it a moment of grace. Somehow you were able to experience the gorgeousness of the world that we inhabit that we usually don't see.
Excuse me, well, Barry, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We admitted you by mistake.
So that's my friend Steve.
It says Barry elsewhere.
Yeah, I guess that's the name I put in when I used his laptop to connect. Hey, Steve.
Okay, all right.
He's not as dangerous as he looks.
I don't know Barry, so. You're muted, Barry.
The name is Steve, actually.
Steve. Any other comments or questions? Complaints? Insights?
Something
I mean,
lately, something, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
No, please, I talked too much already. Please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, I was gonna say that I was struck by the comment where he talks about the cultural habit in the Western world of to look for a change of mood so that every event in your life is a surprise. So, you know, you're looking to 4 o'clock for tea. You know, let's have tea. Please help yourself to the cake. When dinner comes, it's dinner time. You know, on and on and on. And anyway, that just struck me because I could relate to that, and I've been thinking about that lately, what it would be like to live without that. You know, like some days just feel like a slog. It's like, oh, I just got to get through this day, you know, or I just got to get to the end of the day so I can sit on the couch and, you know, have some cake and watch TV or something. And one of the things that came to mind on a related note is, I can't remember where he talks about this, about how people talk about having a need to go on vacation, and you know, will say like they want to lay in the dirt, you know, because he's being sarcastic about laying in the sand. But then like he'll have this after comment like they want to take a vacation, but a vacation from what? And I always thought that was really interesting because, you know, my mindset is like, man, there's so much stress. Doesn't he get it? You know, like you got to get away, you know? So this is like speaking to a different shift. Like there's like everything is, you know, I guess whatever you want to talk about it, like being on the dot or part of the practice, it's not necessarily a hassle, so to speak. So I don't know, in that way, there's nothing to get away from and setting something else up in the future to look forward to once you get through whatever you're at. Anyway, that just strikes me as like a very, very different than what I'm kind of used to. And it's something that I'm kind of appreciating. It's something to kind of have as an intention for practice.
Thanks. That's great. I think we could live our lives much more fully and powerfully the more we come present in this way with meditation and action. Be better at whatever it is we do. More skilled, more alive. Well, any other comments? Anyone want to say something? Eric.
Something about meditation practice, and I don't know if this is something I'm experiencing lately, but you know, it's I'll use the clouds analogy, as in like, you know, like observing and being aware of your thoughts passing by. And I sometimes during meditation, I, you know, like I'm obviously sitting, focusing on my breathing, and it's just a moment, but like it's very like small moment that I almost find myself, okay, it's almost like a tiny glimpse of blank moment that there is nothing to observe, but then I can't stay there, and it's almost like panic mode, as in, because you know your mind always has something going on. Normally you think all the time, but there are moments I notice, and it's just almost like No, there's no way, I cannot not be thinking something, and then which in return, all of a sudden becomes I have so what it's almost like in a dark room, like looking for something kind of feeling. I don't know. I don't even know if I can explain it properly. It's a weird experience though. Even thinking about it makes it weird.
As we go along in this practice,
Sorry?
I said as we go further in the practice, I mean, right now, you're just looking at my image and listening to these words. There was no
Yes.
thought happening. There was just pure, simple awareness for however
Right.
long. That is the point. That is meditation. That is what we come back to. It happens all the time. It's the background. It's like the sky, and the thoughts are clouds that come and go, but the sky is always there. This awareness. Oops, now you see off into a thought. Now you're back. It's like we do that all the time. We go off into dream, come back, and when we come back, here we are. And it's truly effortless. This pure, simple awareness that's always here that we can come back to more and more. But when you try, when you make it into an effort, then that effort gets in the way. That becomes,
Yeah, I think that's kind of that. And then the struggle is sometimes creating anxiety. And then that's when I think notice when I like immediately notice and panic about it, I come back and just follow the book and just, start over.
Yeah. And we can come back like you're listening to these words, you're seeing this screen. It's effortless. That's what you come back to, that effortless awareness that never shuts off. And then you go off into a thought like that one, and and then you're back. This is what we do.
Yeah.
And the practice more and more, the further you go down the path, is to rest in this open, simple awareness of the present moment. Without aim, without purpose, just awake, aware, not distracted. The name for this changes as you go down the path, but the practice stays the same. And we call it now Vipassana. That's the Sanskrit, which means awareness practice. Insight meditation, they call it. And it's funny, it's not like it's insight like you're being clever, and figuring out something intellectually. It's just awareness here, simple. And this is what we come back to. Later in the path, the name for this awareness changes. And what's changing is not the practice, but the way in which the world is understood in the light of this awareness. And so at the middle level of the path, it's called emptiness. We begin to understand that I and other, those designations, are just mental constructs and that disappear. And it goes on like that. There are different names for it. You look puzzled, Paul. Philip, I'm sorry. You're muted, Philip.
There we go. If I could add to what Merrick was saying, so in my experience, the thoughts never go away, but they lose their hold on you. You stop paying attention to them. They no longer seem so important. They fade into the background. But our minds think, our hearts pump blood, our lungs breathe. But in the beginning, our thoughts seem really, really important and concrete. But over time and automatically, you realize that's just bogus.
What's bogus?
It's a fraud. Our thoughts aren't concrete. They're not that important. They're always coming and going. We don't have to engage with them anymore.
It's not necessarily
I want to.
it's not necessarily what I am experiencing though. It's actually, yeah, I noticed the same thing. There's this a glimpse of blank moment, actually open space, but it's almost scary, I think. There is this I don't know. And then all of a sudden that anxiety, like it's open space, and it's actually not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's so tiny. It's like you're at an edge of somewhere, and that fear of falling, if you actually let yourself, maybe it's great, but then all of a sudden, like I can't really describe, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words. That's your ego being terrified. Your ego wants to solidify everything, but you're not losing anything. You're gaining the universe. So it seems scary to the ego, but it's not scary at all.
For those of you who have volume 3 of The Profound Treasury, I think you probably do, Philip, page 400 to 401. Read it afterward. You don't have to do it now, but it addresses what we're discussing. And the names for this thoughtless awareness, the Kagyus, of which Trungpa Rinpoche, that was his sect, they call it in Tibetan Tamagi Shepa, which is usually translated ordinary mind. It's completely, utterly ordinary. This simple awareness that has no construction to it. The Nyingmas, they call it in Tibetan Rikpa, which is the translation of Vidya, which is translated variously as true seeing, insight. It's they're both the same. I asked Tsoknyi Rinpoche once, who was a wonderful teacher, if you ever want a recommendation. I asked him what the difference is between Tamagi Shepa and Rikpa. Because to me, they seem to be referring to exactly the same thing. And that's what he said. They are the same. But he said the way in which they're introduced in these sects, the Nyingmas and the Kagyus, is different. And he said the way in which the teacher communicates Rikpa to a student in the Nyingma sect is sudden and somewhat shocking, violent. He said the Kagyus, the way they transmit Tamagi Shepa, is gentle and gradual. But once they're transmitted, the understanding, it's the same. Because it's reality. It's this that we're already sitting in the midst of. You can't shut it off. It's the unity of awareness and space. We just come back to it from dream. Anybody reading that page? He basically is saying, you don't need thought. He says that over and over again. You absolutely don't need it. He's saying, we think we do. And he says over and over again, you just don't need it.
I think it's about that time.
Oh my gosh, it is. All right. I'll put up the chants. Who wants to lead? Oh, we'll just do the dedication of merit, right? And the prayer for peace. Do you do the prayer for peace?
Yeah.
Philip or Barry?
Oh, Philip, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, here we go. I'm going to mute all. So Philip, unmute yourself.
You're muted, Philip.
You're muted, Philip.
Thank you, everyone. I'll start over. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rignum's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, everybody.
And
Thanks,
there
John.
you
Thanks,
have it.
everybody.